Welcome to the Ultimate Landscape CEO podcast. Jason Lee is on the show. Great guy. He runs a $3 million full service landscaping company that he grew from one truck to 25 to 30 employees, Skyfrog Landscape. You're going to learn on this podcast multiple huge setbacks that he has worked through. Jason also hunts and guides alligator hunting in Florida, harvesting 15 to 20 alligators a year. You'll learn about the origin of Skyfrog, the name of his company tied to a former Marine, and business partnership he had with the tree service company. But the main setbacks, one was arson from a disgruntled employee and how it created a huge setback, and then insurance problems created more setbacks, and he really powered through. And then he'll talk about a difficult business partnership dispute with the partner that overlapped land ownership and land deals and how we work through all that. Jason is a fighter, and he has come out on top. He also volunteers at the Florida Nursery and Landscape Association. I don't want to say the initials. I always get them mixed up, but for the Maine Landscape Association in Florida. And you're going to learn about his networking there and his own podcast and how that has helped him as well to grow the business. So this guy is a fun guy. He's a client. He's a fighter. You're going to really love the story. Welcome to the Ultimate Landscape CEO podcast, Jason.
Thank you for having me on, Jeffrey.
This is great, man. We got an alligator catcher and landscaper.
That's right. We are qualified at both of those things.
I hope we get into both of those, and we will. But first, tell the audience a little bit about your company.
Sure. So my name is Jason Lee. I own and operate Skyfrog Landscape out of Gainesville, Florida. We've been in business 16 years now. We're about a $3 million operation. We are split about 50-50, design, build, and maintenance sales. So we're a full service landscape company. We also operate one irrigation service technician and one lawn and pest technician. So it's the breakdown of our business now. And we've grown from me and a truck and a trailer to, between 25 and 30 employees now.
And you're also involved in FNGLA, correct?
FNGLA. So a couple of years ago, I decided to get more active in our local chapter. And our local chapter here in Gainesville and North Central Florida is called Front Runners. I think overall the organization probably has 12 to 14 chapters across the state. And so starting to become more active at a local level, more active at the state level. I've gone to meetings for the past decade, but really feel like the organization historically was very nursery heavy. So just trying to bring a new breath of fresh air for some landscape contractors and hopefully get more landscapers involved in the organization.
It's very well organized on a state levels.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit, but let's just start at the beginning. Where did you come up with the name Skyfrog Landscaping?
Sure. So I studied environmental horticulture at the University of Florida. I got my AA at St. John's River Community College over in Palatka, transferred into UF, studied horticulture. During my time there in the horticulture department, a man named Joe Vasquez was our greenhouse manager. So Joe took over operations of the greenhouse. He worked really hard, ruffled too many feathers because he worked so hard at UF. But at that time frame, he had started Skyfrog Tree Service, and Joe was a retired Marine, 31 years, air and amphibious reconnaissance. So Skyfrog was his unit's call name. Worked with Joe while landscaping for myself. When he started the business, we dragged brush, haul logs. Fast forward a couple of years, I had done a stint working for the Yellowstone Group as they acquired Arson Outdoor on the east coast of Florida. Moved back to Gainesville to start a business. And then kind of got partnered back up with Joe and another friend of mine, John Burns, who was doing sales for him at the time. And the more I tell the story, I'm pretty sure Joe kind of just dictated that I was going to be Skyfrog Landscape and we were all going to work together. So we started the business, my business, partnering with their business so that we could build a referral network between the two. And successfully, we've built a very reputable brand here in Gainesville and the surrounding areas. The concept might be a little abnormal. We still have to tell people we're two separate entities. I have no common ownership of Skyfrog Tree Service or vice versa. So sometimes that's a little confusing to our customers, but then we just tell them that, there's a different office number to call, and we all work together. And that's
In
that's
other
how we know.
words, you're brothers, but you're not married.
Yes, exactly. Which also sometimes we have some, there's a little bit of brother and sister drama that comes around every now and then, but we nip that in the bud. It's been a great relationship building the brand and the business.
So it's still going. Is that right? Skyfrog Tree Service. And how are they doing? Not that this is about them, but
No, they're doing good. I don't know their financials altogether, but I mean they're operating, I believe, 3 tree crews, probably a couple $1 million in revenue.
okay.
So,
And do you guys still throw business to each other?
yeah. So back and forth, residentially, commercially, we try to make cross connections between property managers, and I guess, and looking at the long term value of a client, we definitely have, the number of leads daily might not be that great, but when we look at some of the relationships that we've built that are now, 10-year plus customers for going both directions, that's pretty significant in the long term revenue that we've been able to help each other generate.
That's great. Yeah, I just wrote about customer lifetime value. I don't know if you were quoting that or not.
All right. I saw that.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Company names can come from something with the word green in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or someone's name. And the third category is, where did you come up with that name? And Skyfrog is definitely in that third category.
Absolutely.
So
we're going
that's
on
awesome.
we're going on vacation in a couple of weeks up to Pigeon Forge. And Joe, the founder of the tree service, has since retired up to Bryson City, North Carolina. So I'm going to try to go up, stop along the way, visit Joe, and then maybe do a little video recording, or at least an audio recording, and maybe a little mini podcast, and get Joe's version of the story of where the name came from so that we can plug it in on the website, because it's a very commonly asked question.
Yeah. It's a great name, by the way. So when did we first meet, or when did you join my Leaders Edge peer group?
So I came to your destination company event January of 2019.
Yeah.
Kind of as I grabbed my buddy Jordan, who has a tree business in Tampa, told him, hey, we're going out to New Orleans. We're going to go have some fun. I'm going to go check out Jeffrey Scott. I'm thinking about joining the peer group. I believe we joined like November, like around Thanksgiving 2020.
Okay.
It would have been.
Yeah, we started coaching
Yep.
first, then consulting. By the way, Jason also has a podcast, which we'll talk about, with his friend Jordan. So Jason does a lot of different things here. How long have you been hunting alligators? Let's just get this one out of the way.
We've been hunting alligators since 2004. So going on 22, 23 years.
So you just grew up doing that?
I didn't start until I drew my first set of alligator tags. As I was walking up the hill from the physics building at the University of Florida to go to preview as a transfer student, and got on the phone, and I'd gone the year before and just watched as an observer and said, oh, this looks like it could be fun. So I called in for the state lottery. I got a set of tags, and then we haven't looked back since. It's become quite the obsession. And then we also guide I guess you would say professionally, we guide alligator hunts. We hunt with a good group of friends over the years. So we generally, we'll harvest 15 to 20 alligators a year.
So how do I get on that list to go out with you?
We need to find yourself here in Florida, somewhere between August 15th and November 8th.
Is that the season? August 15th, November 8th. Okay.
That is the season. And at this point, it really depends on what the lottery gods will allow us. So we submitted, yesterday was actually the submission date for the first phase of the lottery. So now probably tomorrow or the next day, we'll find out, what tags and for what areas we get to hunt in.
So do you focus more on alligator lottery than H2B lottery?
Yes. Yeah, I would say so.
Wow. Okay. And you guys eat everything you catch?
No, we sell the alligators whole to a processor that we've been selling gators to for many years, and he sells the meat to restaurants. So, and then if we need any meat, we just buy it from him directly. So,
okay.
Cleaning alligators is not for the hunters out there. It's not as easy as cleaning a whitetail deer. So processing a whitetail deer is much easier than processing a 500-pound alligator.
You need devices to do that.
The amount of sharp knives or razor blades, I've tried all the tricks, and it's a bear. It's a lot of work. So we'll leave it to the professionals.
It's a bear, huh? Or a big alligator.
Or a big alligator, yeah.
So we met up around 2020, I guess right before COVID was that. And then we started working together probably during COVID, I suppose. And then you had a fire hit your building and facility. Tell us, like, and I know you've overcome it, and I know you're still sort of dealing with parts of it, but that was a big task for you guys to overcome. And tell us what happened there.
So I have an employee. It's actually my most senior employee. I think he's been with me 14 years now. He's a full-time firefighter with the Alachua County Fire Rescue. And then he works part-time for us. And at this point, he's probably working about a day a week. But over the years, whenever he wasn't on shift, he'd come in and fill kind of the Swiss Army knife. He's been around long enough to do everything. So a great asset to the business. But he called me at 10/14, August 23rd, 2021. I was fixing to go to bed, and I picked up my phone. I said, Brian Gregory, why is he calling me? And instantly I thought, great, one of the guys got in a wreck. Something happened. Like, I assumed something happened. He wasn't calling me just to catch up because I knew he was on shift. But he told me, I answered the phone. He said, hey, the shop's on fire. And so I said, no. And he said, the shop is on fire. I said, no way. And so then with a few expletives, he said, no, the shop is on fire. And he's like, is our address 2546 Northwest 74th Place? I said, yes. He said, okay. I said, hold on. A call's coming across the radio. Our city fire rescue responded to the fire, and he said they can see flames from 441, which I don't remember, Jeffrey. You stopped by not too long after the fire, but we're at the end of an industrial road, which you cannot see our shop from the main highway.
Yeah.
So coming over the railroad tracks, they saw flames, and so we had a fire in the building. We went there at 11 o'clock at night. Probably fire rescue left at 3 or 4 a.m. I give a suggestion to anyone that if you have this type of incident at your facility at night, to make sure you bring lots of beer, because unfortunately no one had any beer to mourn our sorrows at this point. But we thought that the incident the night of was just a faulty wire where you could see the most damage. The fire was isolated to the office portion of our building. So our building was a 50, or still is a 50 by 80 red iron steel building. We probably had about the front third was office space that we split with our tree service at that point in time. So we were all working in the same facility. But most of the fire damage that we could see were from the offices, and we had air conditioning unit there, all the electrical, anything that could go wrong in the building was all isolated there. So we thought it was just some old faulty thing from the building. Was built in the 70s. So just age of building. Go through the deal. I stayed the night in my truck there. Guys come to work the next day. I had texted a few of our managers just to give them a heads up of what was going on. Hey, we had a fire in the building. Come into work. We'll have a plan. So the guys get there at 6:30 in the morning, and they're shock and awe that the building is, on fire, and kind of, everyone's distraught and kind of dealing with what's going on, and everyone wants to help. What can we do to help? It's like, luckily, none of our equipment, none of our trucks was damaged. So it's like, the best thing you can do right now is we wrote out the schedule on pieces of paper. It's like, just go to work and serve our customers. I said, the best way that we can deal with this problem right now is to go to work, keep working so that we can send bills and get paid. And then we'll deal with the rest. Probably about 10 o'clock the morning after, I finally got a hold of our insurance agent. And by then I'd given them a list of things I need. Hey, I need 5 laptop computers. I need a construction trailer. I need all of these things that we need. They come to find out we weren't insured for any of that. So we had we did not have any contents policy for our office. We had no renter's insurance. Had no extra expense insurance, which I guess is what the construction trailer and the temporary office would have fallen under. So we found out everything we were not insured for, which was a great learning lesson there. But from there, it's probably 5 o'clock. It's probably 5 o'clock the day after. We made it through the day. I remember I went with a couple of the guys. It's like, all right, let's go get. We haven't eaten since yesterday. Like, let's go get a burger and some beer. So we go down and get a burger and some beer, and then one of the guys texts us and he says, "Hey, was this gas can supposed to be in the office?" And so he sent a picture of our little office with all the drywall that the fire department had to pull down. So they go in, and we had upstairs above our office, we had built a kind of a bid room and planning room to do commercial estimates in. And then we had a storage room for parts and things like that. So I said, no, I said, I was there at 5:30. I said, I closed the shop down. There was definitely not a 5-gallon can of gasoline in the office. So that's when we called the police department back out. And apparently the fire inspector had missed the 5-gallon can of gasoline.
Are you sure? What the heck is that?
And he missed the 5-gallon can of gasoline. And then after the insurance inspector came out, he was kind of dismayed. He's like, how did the fire inspector not see the 2 inches of gas that was in this trash can? Or, because I guess the person that ended up setting the fire, this was a case of arson. As I'm going along with the story. So it ended up being a case of arson, and the person just doused the office with 5 gallons of gas. And then a lot of it did not ignite. Where he lit the fire was underneath the air handler. So where the fire was ignited, when the heat got high enough for the air to kick on, it sucked all the fire up through the HVAC unit. And that kind of caused the rapid spread and the burn pattern that we could see from outside of the building. So it all kind of made sense once we got into it. But that person it was an interesting 3 or 4 months. It took them to build the case and finally arrest him and charge him. But he is serving 10 years in prison for our arson. And then apparently he went on a crime spree across the state, was stealing some things, selling stolen goods, discharged a firearm into an occupied dwelling. So he's got some additional charges. I think at least an extra 6 years or 8 years from his other crime spree. Yeah. So that's kind of that's the very short version of our fire story. There's a lot of.
But was he an employee? A disgruntled somebody?
He was an employee. So he was an employee. He's actually one of our landscape installation crew leaders. So never really, besides being a little quiet, never would have suspected or thought anything.
Did you find out why he did it?
So he had hit us with some credit card fraud, which I didn't catch probably about a week before the fire. And I just disputed the charges. I saw charges come up on Amex and just disputed them and canceled the card. And then apparently he had stolen some checks and gotten the checks forged. He had claimed that his girlfriend's son had leukemia. And I guess this is when he was going to his probation meetings, when he would go to leukemia treatments. But he had us manually write him a payroll check, which generally we do not do. But he had claimed that he needed some medical expenses covered for the girlfriend's son. So it's like, hey, man, no problem. We'll cancel the direct deposit for this week. I'll just write you a check, on a Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever day it is. And so we think that whatever check cashing store that he went to, he built a level of trust with them. They remembered him. So then he came and stole some checks and then forged the checks to $1,000 more than whatever that one payroll check was. So they went ahead and cashed 2 forged checks. Then after the fire, we're guessing he came back to steal some more checks. The check drawer was open in the office. So it's our only assumption. All of this is just an assumption that he was trying to cover his tracks from check forgery. So I think he ended up cashing $6 or $7 grand worth of checks, which we did not get back from the fraud department from Wells Fargo. But yeah, so that was our best assumption, unless there was something else there.
So he's doing 16 years in jail?
Yes. And so I'm hoping he does life. They're the discharging the firearm into an occupied dwelling, given his record, might carry on to they just might keep him. So,
Jeez.
Yeah.
So what?
And he showed up to work the next day.
You can't make this up.
No, he showed up to work the next day. He worked another 3 to 4 days. And of course, we just stopped what we were doing. We went into full detective mode. And unfortunately, we had a nighttime detective, which GPD, given some of the other things we've had happen, stolen goods, break-ins, things like that, sometimes they don't do anything. But our detective was definitely putting in the effort. But there was a disconnect of him being a night shift detective and then us being around all day long to go gather. So we played detective and we went down every business on the street and we pulled all the video and we uploaded it to the detective system. So we were quite busy and, we've all watched too many, Criminal Minds or Law and Order. So we thought ourselves quite the detectives, which ended up paying off. I put out a $5,000 reward, to any information that led to conviction. So his girlfriend at the time, which I guess had broken up with him and kind of led to part of this mental break, she called me and she said, "Mr. Jason, I know it's got to be him." She's like, "As soon as I heard, I just know it's him." And so then we started connecting some dots, and we connected the Amex charges for
And
the.
you paid her $5,000?
I ended up, yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
she came to collect. I thought that we weren't going to have to do that, but she did come to collect after his conviction. I thought that we were just bonding over the fact that we were trying to get this crazy person out of our life, but she definitely came to collect, which is fine.
So how much? Let's just bring it back to the business. So how much business interruption did it cause, like in time and work hours or lost income?
I mean, lost income's hard to. I mean, of course, in that time frame of 2021, it's the middle of COVID. Everything's just a mess. We can't find people to work. Everything's prices are through the roof on materials. So there are a lot of other external factors there at that time in business. But I know we lost a couple of maintenance properties because of it. It was us trying to manage the interruption of the fire plus all of the other things that were going on. So it's hard to just pin it just on that one thing. But we definitely lost a few properties. One of them in particular is like, oh, we know you guys have a lot going on right now. It's like, well, I don't want that to be the excuse. So then internally with the guy Nick that was my number 2 guy at the time, internally I told him, I said, that's unacceptable. I said, I don't care what we get terminated for. I said, they can fire us for doing crappy work. I said, but I don't accept the fact that just because our building burned down that we're gonna lose the quality of service that we have. But we spent 3.5 years operating off of a temporary power pole, for our mechanic. While our tree service was there at the same shop, we had one plug, they had one plug. So my mechanic was very happy when we got power back into the building, probably about a year ago.
So did you rebuild the whole thing?
So we ended up not rebuilding the offices. By the time that was all said and done, the construction company, the original estimate they gave us was going to be, I think, $300,000 more than what the price that they given us to rebuild the interior. So our insurance money got us a new shell of a building. We had to replace, there are 4 beams in the building. We had to replace 1.5 beams, new purlings, a new skin of metal on the outside, electrical and insulation. So we've got a new fully furnished, insulated building with power. Is what we got back for the insurance money, and I had to kick a little bit in at the end for the electricians. Right now, we're still operating out of the construction trailer, and we'll probably just stay there until it's my ultimate goal to buy the piece of property next to us. So it's got another building on it with lots of offices. So that'll be my primary objective here in the next couple of years.
So you're going to move as opposed to finish rebuilding?
So we won't move. We'll just take the fence down. If I can buy the piece of property that, and I've had a few discussions with the people over the years, and they just haven't been interested in selling. And they've told me they'd come to me whenever it's time for them or whenever they want to sell. So if we can work out a negotiation there, we'll just take the fence down between the 2 properties, operate our offices out of their building. It's primarily office space with a small bay in the back, much smaller building than the one we have. And then we'll just operate the warehouse as our shop. So.
And where did the tree company go?
So they moved out, and part of this saga, there are 4 of us that own the property together. So myself, Nick, and then John and Joe with the tree service. There's 4 owners of this property now that has this fire damage. And so now there's 4 opinions of how it should be rebuilt. And so now we get into the whole partnership game of when things don't work out right. But it had gotten to the point with rebuilding, and both of our businesses had just outgrown the space to work together. So they ended up, I told them that I was going to look for another facility for us because we had grown a little bit bigger. We had more employees, more trucks. I said, I'm going to look for another place to go. In the meantime, they started looking for another place to go, found a place. Bought their facility out near Williston, which is southwest Alachua County. So they've since moved out. And then I bought out the shares from the partners in our holding company for our shop. I'm now the sole owner of our property. They've moved out, kind of out of town, a little more rural.
People talk about having the problem with partnerships in business and then the partnership in land. And you don't think, you might think, well, what could happen with land? But in the worst case scenario, it becomes just as big a problem.
No, it did. It got messy, especially with the construction and what we were going to do with it. Everyone had a different opinion. I got outvoted. My opinion was that the contractor we chose was going to hose us at the end and try to stick it to us on the rebuilding construction. But, partnership 4 ways, I got outvoted 3-1. And then it kind of turned out how I thought it would. But at the end of it, we got a fair evaluation of the property done and came up with, when we started the LLC for the holding company, we had an operating agreement, kind of already planned out of how if we needed to get ourselves not exactly in this scenario, but it laid out some ground rules for how we figured out our final outcome.
So what advice would you give listeners either regarding fire or partnerships on property that you've learned the hard way?
The fire would be just to always be overinsured. Make sure you have the basics of insurance. In the same year, we were at a peer group meeting in New Orleans. I just met Ivan. So Ivan had just gotten into the group, Ivan Katz with Great Lakes Design. And so Ivan hops in the truck with me and we're going to tour Mullen Landscape. I just met Ivan, And 2 weeks prior to meeting Ivan, he's like, man, how's everything going down in Florida? And I said, man, it's a wild ride. And this is February of 2021. So before the fire, I said, man, it's a wild ride. I said, I hired an office manager that's been with me 4 months. And I said, and she went out for an errand the other day. And I said, and then she got arrested for embezzling, however much money from her previous business that she worked for. He's like, oh man. He's like, I had an office manager take me for $250,000 or whatever Ivan's story is. I don't know the number, but so then Ivan gives me great advice of, hey, you should have X, Y, and Z insurance, in this scenario to protect yourself. And you should go through all of these protocols to make sure it doesn't happen to you. And I went back through her books and she hadn't done anything within our business. So, things like that advice I've gotten from Ivan, it'd be the same thing for the fire. It'd be have contents insurance for your office, everything. Because we probably lost, once we started adding up everything, it doesn't seem like a lot, but we got to $30,000 or $40,000 pretty quickly with, things that we lost in the office. Whether it be contents insurance or extra expense insurance, if we would have had extra expense insurance, that would have covered a large expense of having that temporary trailer on the property. And then with partnerships on land, I don't know, that gets a little tricky. Like I said, it all depends on if it's friends or family or investments, but definitely having real estate and a separate business, separate entity. If you're going to have a partnership, have a holding company, have an operating agreement, have an attorney draw it up, a neutral attorney, draw it up, make sure everyone's protected, because everything's great until it's not. Be my suggestion.
Well, you've been very resilient. You have such a great attitude, in part because I know the fire was only part A of some of the drama you had to go through, and then Nick, the partner in your land, was an employee in your business or a partner in your business?
So he was an employee in our business. So he was an employee in our business. And I don't know if there'd be enough time for me to actually try to explain the whole scenario, because I still don't fully understand how I got myself into the predicament I did. But there was a point in time that Nick had worked at our company and, came to me and he said, hey, well, what if I wanted to buy in with, some equity? I said, I'm really not interested in that. And we didn't think much more of it. His father passed away. They inherited some money. He came back to me. He's like, hey, I don't really, want to necessarily be an employee forever. He's like, I do want, I like the idea of having a business. What if I take our fertilizer portion of our business and irrigation and start a separate business? And I'll run that. And then, until we get it up and going, he'll still run our maintenance division. That's how the plan was laid out. And then to kind of attach ourselves in a formal manner, compared to with Skyfrog Tree Service, we just work under the same brand and there's no agreement. It's a handshake, and it's been a handshake for 16, 17 years that we're working under the same brand. So, but since our lines of services and customers would cross over between the potential business that Nick would start and Skyfrog Landscape, we signed a non-owner cross buyout sales agreement, which I didn't fully understand what a trigger option was at that point in time. I also had no money at that point in time. I had no money, couldn't hire an attorney, so I didn't even have an attorney look at the document. to show my naivety. So we signed the agreement, and proceeded to operate as normal. Uh, fast forward 8 years. Nick never started. He started an LLC to form this, to sign the document. Never took the initiative to take any of our fertilizer or irrigation work and start the business. He started a business that never had an employee or never ran $1 of gross sales through it. But this document pretty much became beholden that we were on paper 50-50 partners of some degree between these two companies. There was a large level of toxicity going on in our business, kind of some of it pre-fire, some of it post-fire, that needed to be dealt with. And so it all kind of came to a head in 2022 to a point where all of our team, it got to the point where, hey, if you don't do something about this, then we're going to leave. Op manager, salespeople, field managers. So I terminated his position in November of 22. And so then we got into a pretty nasty not litigation. Anyway, we figured out he pulled the trigger on me on the trigger agreement after he was terminated. I don't know, 45, 60 days after. So then we fast tracked an agreement where I had to buy out his non-existent business. So I bought out the company that he did not start, and I'm almost done with that deal. And so we were very glad that we're going to be putting that past us. So, but that is a prime example for anyone out there. If you're going into business with anyone, or if you're going to sign your name on a legal document, have an attorney look at it, because that cost me. That was probably my most expensive business education so far.
I think that's sort of a given. So maybe the lesson's even something different or more profound, which is if you don't think you can afford, if you think you're too small to hire a lawyer or afford a lawyer or, get a bigger contract for something, you're starting small because you plan to get bigger. So you better.
And I had to consult, and I told the first attorney that I went to, because I didn't have a business attorney, and I ended up working with two attorneys to kind of navigate me through that. And, I told one of them the same thing I just told you. It's like, oh, I didn't have any money. It's just like, well, it's like, how's that $500 sound now? If you would have just come in and had me read over that to you and tell you not to sign it. It's like, oh, well, it sounds like it'd be the cheapest thing I've ever done. So, but, then really a lot of the stuff that happened, some of it stemmed to even Jeffrey, when we started working with you, part of me wanting to come work with you was it's like, okay, like we organizationally, I knew there were some issues with the specific person, but it's I thought
he was a problem, or his situation. I don't want to judge him here on a podcast, but I think he was distracted with whatever his business's wife had going on, and the whole thing.
So, but whenever I started working with you, I thought that it's like, okay, well, Jeffrey can help us organizationally become more organized, and we can structure our way through this. And because my end goal was not to have the end goal that we had. My end goal was that we all keep working together. I mean, he was with me for a decade or more. I remember after our first strategic planning meeting, he sent me an email. I think he'd sent the email before I got back to our Airbnb of, I don't think this person should be in your business. It's like, oh, okay, this is what professional coaching and this consulting gets you. Raw honesty right off rip. So I did not take that advice at that point in time, because I still thought we could work our way through it. But fast forward a couple of years and it all landed how it did.
Yeah, I recall. I don't remember the exact specifics, except he had a big distraction, I think, with his wife's business, and I don't know. But
yep,
there you go.
No, there were lots of things there.
Yeah. So what's the takeaway for the audience there besides hire a lawyer to look at your agreement? What else from a partnership perspective?
I see so many partnerships fail just observationally through friends or people I know or see online. But then, the ones that I see succeed are awesome. Our videography team, Sky Palm Studios that we have here in Gainesville for Skyfrog, they're two young entrepreneurs. They click, their brains click. It seems like they're on the same path. They've worked out. We did a podcast episode with them, I don't know, a month ago. And after interviewing them, figuring out how they started, they just they're on the same page with everything. And even at 23 and 26 years old, they've kind of gone through all the steps and building the boundaries of a partnership that is healthy. So it's, I'm not to say that I wouldn't recommend against it, but it's just going through and making sure that everyone's on the same page with the vision ahead of time. I think that's if you're on the same page with where you're going and how you're going to get there, then when it's agreed upon ahead of time, then you just get to work and do it. And I think that could
So
build
where
up.
were you guys misaligned? Again, I don't remember every detail except that he wasn't good for you.
I don't know if we were. I mean, the idea was to grow the business and be successful, and and see where it went across the board, grow the business that we have grown. But I think the disconnect was, I think he got some money, a significant amount of money, kind of got the idea of, I don't need to do much anymore. Almost as an employee, he's taking the idea of, I'm now going to be an absentee owner almost. It's kind of the mindset. And then the other business that you mentioned, I think, was a very large distraction also at the same point in time. So I think I don't think the disconnect was in our vision, because we're still trudging away towards the vision that we'd laid out, 12, 15 years ago. But I think it's just the person or the scenarios changed there. It was also COVID. We both also had kids. So you're adding a lot of personal dynamics into people's lives that, you don't know how that affects that also. But so, yeah.
As I'm hearing you talk, what I hear is, even if you're aligned with somebody, you still need a legal agreement, because so much can change, and it can change quickly.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. And you have a couple interesting things going on here. You have a great team now going on in your business, and you've gotten these things behind you. You've paid off the ex-partner. You've been through the fire. So how are you feeling about the business now?
No, we're moving forward. We've made leaps and bounds, over the years. Another big problem that we had during the time of, Nick leaving our business is that we weren't making any money. We were losing piles of money, and I couldn't put my thumb on where it was. And once we put our thumb on where it was our maintenance division, which Nick was running. And, we ran, and it didn't even sink in, Jeffrey, when you had, in the peer group, when we did our initial breakdown of our financials that you have everyone do. I broke down our financials, and I got to the bottom. And after you do the P&L, you go down and you have equations or whatever you have figured out for throughput by division. So I went through and did our installation division, our maintenance division, and then our one irrigation tech and our one fertilizer tech. It didn't sink in that our throughput on maintenance was $26 a man hour.
Oy.
And I remember telling Nick that. And I remember going through it and saying, hey man, we got to do something different. I said, our throughput here is like $36 an hour. I said, here on install, we still can, and looking at everyone else's numbers, which were also, apparently in Florida, our numbers are always a little bit lower than across the country. But, I was benchmarking across other people in the group. It's like, okay, we got room for improvement, but this one's a really big problem. So, and then internally, because you had to look at it, I look at things, and I don't know if I think being part of your group and really trying to wrap my head around things and look at our business from the outside, or the global, I call it the global perspective. Once you look at it, if you can step away and just look at everything as an overall, instead of getting stuck in one portion of the numbers or one specific thing or problem. But, we would look at our numbers on an hourly basis in our internal spreadsheets, which can all be manipulated or man hours changed or this and that, the way we were operating. So we were looking at these numbers and they weren't accurate. So finally I just I said, well, I got to figure out what's going on. And I pulled our payroll reports, came up with all of our direct labor hours for maintenance. And it took some time, the way we were reporting in payroll, to figure that out. But we figured out all of our direct labor hours for maintenance for the past 2 years, my office manager and I, and we broke it down. And it's like, okay, we're at $26 an hour in throughput for the same year that we had looked at the numbers when I joined your group. And it's like, hey, we're still at that same number right now, and it's, and I'm still tracking it this way. And I don't know if I'm just making it up, but I'm calling it our inefficiency rate. So it would be our unbillable time plus any inefficiencies in pricing. When I did gross sales for maintenance and those labor hours, we were at $26 an hour. And based on our estimated hours, we were at a 41% inefficiency rate. And it's just like, wow, this isn't good at all. So we started making changes then. And so now every year, getting to where we're going now, every year we're making those changes. And I think we're at like a 14% inefficiency rate now,
Wow.
somewhere around there. So we've made great changes. We still would like to be at a higher hourly rate for profitability. It's Florida. Our market's, a little tough, but markets are changing. So we have added a few positions this year. We've added on a business development position. We've never really had an outward facing sales position. So, the boots on the ground, besides me going around and networking and trying to build relationships and do whatever I can do, but just a true outside sales position to go and network and build relationships. We've added that on. My friend Aaron, who has worked at the University of Florida for the past 15, 18 years, she and I worked together in college for a couple of years doing design build, but the University of Florida has dissolved their horticulture department. So Erin didn't necessarily see the future there, as she was very focused on trying to help rebuild their landscaping program. So I told her, I said, listen, this is a sign. I said, I don't know what you want to do with the rest of your career. I said, a great place to start is you coming on board here and let's try to conquer the world. Like, let's get the band back together. We kicked ass in college together. Let's do it. So she came on board January of this year. We had a very long-term designer and salesperson leave our business, which I'm very sad about because she was a rock star. She left to go sell windows. So through all these things, and she was here through all of the shit show. And so through all the things, I think it wore on her, or I didn't cast my vision great enough for her moving forward. So she decided to leave our business, take a window selling job. And then after about a month or two of that, our biggest competitor swooped in and he was in need of a salesperson and lured her away from the window job. So she's now working for one of our biggest competitors, but his void was created because his top salesman was leaving. Apparently their, culture and vision casting wasn't going too well over on the other side either. So Clayton's joined our team the end of January. So we've got a new designer. Clayton's also going to take over doing commercial maintenance estimates. So we've got our business development position, inside sales with design, and then Clayton's going to be doing commercial maintenance. And then with Tammy's role in the business, we'd have sales and operations together, which worked very well for the size that we've been historically, and probably caused some problems, but then also helped with some problems by just not having it with she solved her own communication gaps with customers between sales and operations. Found a account manager, hired him as an account manager. His name's Ben Logan. He had a company out in Oregon. Actually found him. He was listening to our podcast, and I was talking about hiring an account manager. So he cold called me. Hey man, like, I'm in your area. Like, moved here, didn't like Oregon politics during COVID, landed in Alachua. Think I might be able to help you out. I've been watching your business since I've been in town. He was going to start a irrigation maintenance company. He's like, I can put that on hold. He's like, let me join your team and let's see what we can do. So he's now moved into an operations manager role. So he's overseeing all operations. So now we have sales and operations separately, which is different from what we've been doing. So we're kind of navigating through a new process and with new people. And so my take on it was, well, hey, what a better time to figure out a new process when no one's used to the old process. So we're going to lay out our path. We're coming through weekly or every other week, and any hiccups in our communications or processes, we're trying to nip in the bud. So I think that's going pretty well. So at this point, we're selling work, doing work, and billing it. So we're moving in the right direction. So we've got some pretty.
You have a podcast.
And we have a podcast.
You started that like a year ago?
So probably, I think we hit the 2-year mark. So yeah, we hit the 2-year mark. Green Side Up podcast. I started it with Jordan's one of my best friends. He owns an independent. Well, he and his dad own. It's a 48-year-old family business, tree care business in Tampa. They kick ass down there. It's a great business. But I started listening to podcasts. Was a kind of a new thing. I knew you had a podcast, but I didn't know. I kept hearing about all these podcasts, but I didn't know where to listen to it. So one day, I wanted to listen to Two Bears, One Cave. Two of my favorite stand-up comedians. They have a podcast. I'd see all these clips online. So it's like, well, I want to watch that. Like, the very entertaining clips. So I was like, I want to hear more. So I had to get my wife to show me how to download Spotify. And then I started listening to podcasts, stumbled upon industry podcasts. Jordan and I were out in his backyard late one night, and I said, we need to start a podcast. We have all these stories. So we have all these stories. We have employee stories. So we have real stories. We're not giant businesses, but I said we're definitely, you know, we're not owner operators. I said we're going to have an endless amount of content just from our day to day businesses. I said, and we know piles of people. Jordan's he's the current president of the Florida chapter of the ISA this year. I said, we're doing all these things. We know all these people. I said, let's just start a podcast and we can, talk about it, tell war stories and interview some people along the way. That's what we're doing.
I know it's fun. You guys had a blast. You had me on. Appreciate that. And sounds like you got a hire out of it. That's kind of interesting.
No, that was unexpected, but I'll take it. And I told Jordan, I said, well, it's paying off. That was worth it.
Have you any other fruit that's fallen from the podcast tree for you?
Still networking, making industry connections. We're going to trade shows and podcasting, and we saw you up at Equip. We're going to our local trade shows here, but we actually met. Probably one of the most beneficial things so far is our introduction with Intrigue Media. We 2 years ago, it would have been right after we started the podcast. We got a booth at the Landscape show, which is FNGLA's state show. We got a booth there, 2 booths set up, tables, swag, podcasting. So we were able to bank a pile of episodes across the 3 days. But Rob Murray with Intrigue Media comes bebopping up. Didn't know who Intrigue Media was. And I don't do a good Canadian accent, but Rob comes bebopping up and says, "Hey man," he's like, "You guys got a podcast?" I said, "Yep." He's like, "Well, I got a podcast." I was like, "Cool." He's just like, "You guys got landscape companies?" It's like, "Yes, we do." And so we kind of kicked it off. He's like, "Well, we got mimosas in our booth." I was like, "Well, we have Busch Light in the cooler here." So you want a beer? It's like, "Yeah." So you want to come back for a mimosa? Sure. It's like, so we made instant friends. It's like the Step Brothers movie. But no, getting to know those guys. And at the current point in time, I wasn't in the market for a new marketing company, under contract. I just told him, he's like, "So your business is exactly, the business we want, we want to take on." It's like, we want to grow $2 million companies to $10 million companies. That's what he told me the first night I met him. I said, "Rob," I said, "I like you. We're having fun." I said, "But unless you want to pay the contract for this other company that I'm under contract with, if you want to buy out my contract," I said, "then we can have something." He's like, "No, I don't want to do that." And it's like, "Okay, well, let's talk in 6 or 8 months." I said, "Let me see how," I said, "if what I'm currently doing works and I'm seeing results," I said, I'm not going to come work with you." I said, "But if I'm not seeing results, then I'd be very interested in, talking to you about what you have going on." And in the meantime, Jordan actually started working with them because he had they're running it's a very highly successful tree care business that still lives kind of in the 1980s. So the adaptation of kind of new ways and technology and things is kind of interesting in Jordan's business. Fast forward, he became a client. I was watching the results that he was having. When my contract renewed, we signed up with him, and so far, I would attribute a lot of the growth we've had in leads and sales this year to what they're currently doing in our business. So I'd say that's anyway, that's a big benefit so far for the podcast.
That's great. Intrigue Media will actually be a sponsor of our Summer Growth Summit,
Nice.
Which is August 18th to 20th, and it's going to be at or co-hosted by Ivan Katz that you mentioned earlier.
Yep.
Great Lakes Landscape Design, and also Troy Cloud Landscape Associates.
Yeah,
I know you can't make it because you've got FNGLA business.
We do. We'll be down at the landscape show this year. So I'm currently slated to be our incoming president for the Front Runners chapter. So we've got some FNGLA business and podcasting business to do down in Orlando. But I've been to Ivan's facility. It's a phenomenal facility, and apparently Troy Clogg has a heck of an operation.
Yeah, he really does. Yeah, it's going to be it's like a double header. It's like going to see your favorite.
I was watching some videos online, that Troy was doing. And I just know Troy through Ivan. Ivan, I'm very fascinated being from Florida, listening to snow stories from everyone that has to plow snow. So Ivan has given me a great education over the years in snow plowing that I still don't fully understand, but he always references Troy, as his buddy that plows snow. So then apparently Troy has a very successful snow plowing business.
Yeah, he does. You have a final alligator story you can end us off with here?
Man, we are, every time we go out, we're trying not to get bit. I don't have a great story besides we are extremely excited that in 2 days, we're going to find out where we get to hunt this year, and August 15th can't get here soon enough.
How does it work? You go like late at night?
So we used to. When we started hunting, it was only at night. We could only hunt at night. We were not allowed to hunt in the daylight. So we would stay up all night and drive the boat as fast as we could at alligators with headlights on and throw harpoons. It was tons of fun. Probably the most fun way to hunt alligators. Now we're older. We don't really like staying up all night. The season also used to be a lot shorter. So we'd have one specified week, and then we had 1 week if we didn't get our alligators to kind of make up. So we just went and sleep for 2 weeks. Yeah, we'd go 2 or 3 days at a time with no sleep. But now we're a little bit older. We've changed tactics. So we go out and we, in the daylight, we can now hunt 24 hours a day. So we go out and we'll try to find an alligator that we want to harvest with binoculars. There's a cat and mouse game involved. If we get close enough, we'll use a treble hook on a fishing rod. And so then we snag the alligator. And then there's a fight similar to catching a very large fish that ensues on the fishing pole. Then we've got a 1 pound 20-aught hook, treble hook that's tied to a piece of mule tape. And then once we get close enough to the alligator, we throw that overboard, hook them, pull them to the boat, harpoon them, and then we dispatch them with a 12-gauge bang stick. So a couple of hooks, a harpoon, and a bang stick is our current method.
That is crazy.
And it's pretty entertaining. We've had Matt Heiner came down. He's come down twice now. Mark Smith made it down once. Kevin, that works with Mark, one of our trips to New Orleans, we always, of course, obviously, I'm the alligator hunter, so we're always talking alligator hunting. I told Kevin, I said, if you really want to come, he was obsessed with it. He's like, oh, I love it. And I said, just call me, and so he did. And then I said, okay, well, if we have an open tag and an open date, I said, I'll let you know. And so we did that year. And so I sent him a message, and within 15 minutes, he's like, all right, my plane flight's booked. I'll be there. I said, okay. So Kevin's been down 3 or 4 times. It's good. It's good camaraderie. We're going to try to use it with for some business development this year, a little more formally than we have in the past. Trying to get some people out and, have some fun business relationship building.
And if they don't pay the bills, you just push them over the edge.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh man, crazy. Hey, thank you, Jason. I got to say, you've had your ups and downs, and you just have a great attitude to work through it. And I think you've learned the lessons.
There's quitting's not. I don't see quitting as an option, and I don't really, excuses don't get you anywhere. I mean, we can complain a little bit along the way, and curse a little bit about things that are going on, but at the end of the day, we just got to move forward and get after it. So I'm very, and this year, just the way the year started off, things are a little crazy again, crazy times of things going on with the economy and fuel prices and things like that. So, and I'm fully, if we don't get to where we want to be this year, then I think by the end of the year, we're going to be moving in the right direction, or already there for our numbers for 2027.
It's awesome.
Being 4 or 5 months into the year, I'm already looking into 2027, and we'll see where we go.
Well, for those interested in the Summer Growth Summit, I'm going to put a link in the show notes so you can check that out. We have an early bird discount. And Jason, what's your URL if somebody wants to look up your website?
Sure. It's skyfroglandscape.com. And then our podcast website is greensideuppodcast.com. And we're also on Instagram. We're trying to be more active on social media, or not more active. We've been very active with Skyfrog in our content creation. So we're Skyfrog Landscape and Green Side Up Podcast on Instagram and Facebook.
That's great. Hey, this has gone on a long time. I actually have people beeping me here that I have to get to. So I'm going to say thank you, Jason, and I'm going to pop on over. I'm going to bebop over, to use your verb there.
Sounds good. Well, thank you for having me on, Jeffrey.
And we'll do some alligator hunting together.
Absolutely.
Thank you.